It's impossible to make Bulgarian people to hate Russia and to receive Russia as a huge threat. There is other geopolitical threats for our country, but it is not Russia. The European Union is turning into this ideological project, a project that's based on sanctions, based on isolation, and based now, as we find out, also on this war rhetoric.
Priatelia, pozdravujem vás opäť z Bruselu. Tentokrát je tu so mnou bulharská europoslankyňa Radou Laykovou.
Ahoj Slovensko. My name is Rada, very nice to meet you, and thank you for this opportunity to have something to say about our group and the politics that's happening right here in Brussels in the European Parliament.
Rada, ako sa pozeráš na súčasnú politiku Európskej únie, na to, že sa veľmi veľkým spôsobom, veľmi prudko militarizuje, na to, že ide míňať obrovské prostriedky na vyzbrojovanie?
Yes, just last weeks we get to know that there is 800 billion that's going to be mobilized by the European Commission to prepare Europe for war. And this is a wartime economy. This is something that we're very, very concerned about. And we're very concerned to see countries like Germany also gathering 500 billions. Actually, Friedrich Merz, the probable new chancellor of Germany, is gathering the old parliament to vote on this 500 billion because obviously the newly elected representatives are not going to support this madness because this is not something that the European people want. The European elites, the so-called self-proclaimed elites and establishment, are pushing us towards a war economy. And this is something very dangerous. That's why also people are realizing it, and that's why we have groups like Europe of Sovereign Nations, where I'm very glad to be with European representatives from Slovakia, with Republika, with Milan Urik, with Milan Mazurek, and to inform also our citizens very concretely on what's happening here. So we have the Europe of Sovereign Nations, we have the Patriots. The European political landscape is not the same that it used to be before, but still the majorities are with the people who want to prepare the European economy for war.
Ako sa pozeráte, najmä z tej bulharskej perspektívy, na to, čo robí Európska únia smerom k Rusku? Nekonečné sankcie, rôzny bojkot, embargo a stále zhoršovanie tých vzájomných vzťahov. Pohľady z Bulharska sú možno podobné ako pohľady zo Slovenska, pretože obrovské množstvo Slovákov, obrovské množstvo Bulhárov má stále pozitívny vzťah k Rusku, či už z historických alebo kultúrnych jazykových dôvodov.
Yes. We have a very significant and particular relationships towards the Russian Federation. As Bulgarians, we have a historical relationship and historical past. So this is not influenced necessarily by what is happening now in politics. It's impossible to make Bulgarian people to hate Russia and to receive Russia as a huge threat. There is other geopolitical threats for our country, but it is not Russia. So at the moment, it will be almost impossible if there was a vote, if there was a referendum, to convince people that this is something that we have to go to war for. No Bulgarian is really in the right mind and ready to sign up to be going to war with Russia. And also the sanctions policy, our party Revival is very much vocal and against these packages of sanctions, because what happens now, there are 16 packages of sanctions against the Russian Federation and they're harming our economies. They haven't harmed the Russian economy. So the European Union is turning into this ideological project, a project that's based on sanctions, based on isolation, and based now, as we find out, also on this war rhetoric. And it's completely different than what they promised in the beginning, than the treaties that were promised to have prosperity, to have economic cooperation, and to have peace in Europe. This European Union betrayed its own promises.
Na druhej strane, či už vláda bulharská, ale aj vláda slovenská tieto sankcie podporujú. Jediný, kto je proti už dlhodobo, je Viktor Orbán z Maďarska. Ako sa pozeráš teda na politiku Viktora Orbána?
So we see that Hungarian Viktor Orbán is consequently leading a politics that's sovereignist, that's related to their own national interest. And how does the European Union respond? They look at ways to sanction them. They look at ways to dive in the treaties and create things like Article 7, European values, and this is the way. How does the European Union do it? By stopping funds to Hungary, by labeling them as a country, as a regime that is not faithful to the European values, and this is a direct consequence of their own sovereign policy, of their independent relations to countries like the Russian Federation.
Došlo k obrovskej geopolitickej zmene. V Amerike bol zvolený opäť Donald Trump. Čo to priniesie aj pre Európsku úniu? Ako sa na to pozeráte vy?
Now we have a huge geopolitical shift, and it's not only in international relations. And our biggest hope that this war will end. This was also the promise of Donald Trump, and they're taking very concrete steps for a diplomatic solution, something that we patriotic parties in Europe had been advocating for since the beginning of this conflict. But now the President of the United States himself has taken this policy, and we're very much supportive of this. But as I said, the European establishment, the European elites, they haven't heard the turn of history. They're still running around in crisis mode here and trying to make Europe isolated, trying to make Europe something like a future war economy. So what is happening in the United States is not reflected, is not heard in the European elites, and also what they're doing with cutting ideological projects like USAID. We found out that there have been millions spent also in countries like ours, in countries in Central and Eastern Europe, for liberal propaganda, for things like transgender opera or transgender comic books, and these things have now been stopped in the US. As we find out, there are also European projects that are directed towards this kind of media and this kind of coverage, but now as we have our own group, as we have our representatives in the European Parliament, we will keep our citizens informed on all these topics.
Rada, veľmi pekne vám ďakujem za to, že ste nám poskytli vaše názory a vaše postoje a samozrejme za to, že ste sa prihovorili aj k nám na Slovensku.
Thank you very much.